Hey everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Brand Federation's Beer and Brands. I'm Matt Williams, Managing Partner at Brand Federation, here as always with our founder and CEO, Kelly O'Keefe.
Hi guys.
We have a special guest here in the middle of the hot seat. This is Keith Middleton. Now, Keith is here because he's bringing a perspective to this conversation we don't usually have in this conversation. Keith is the co-founder and co-CEO of Fahrenheit Advisors, which is a, let me see if I describe this correctly.
Yeah.
Right? Business consultancy focused on M&A, financial management,
Human
recruiting,
capital,
human capital, search,
sales process,
pretty much
growth.
everything except what we do at Brand Federation.
Absolutely.
Fahrenheit is a great, and Keith and his partner Rich are great partners of us here at Brand Federation. We thank you for coming in.
Absolutely. I came today to figure out what you all actually do.
Here's what we want to do.
We're hoping to figure that out.
We're gonna figure it out together. Everybody who's watching this podcast right now, at some point in their career, has had to sit across the table from a chief financial officer. Now, I should say, prior to founding Fahrenheit, Keith was also a chief financial officer.
Yes.
Right? What we want to talk about today is what a CFO hears when he or she talks to a marketing person. And the point of this is so that everybody who's watching this podcast right now can keep that in mind the next time they're having to prepare a presentation or to talk about marketing to their CFO. And Keith,
Absolutely.
you are now the avatar for every CFO in the world.
Well, great.
Okay?
You carry that weight on your shoulders.
I'm good. I'm good.
Sorry, so let's get right into it. When you're sitting across the table from a marketing person and they say the word brand, what does a CFO hear?
You know, it's going to depend on the CFO, right? But I think the traditional answer is my logo, what's on the side of the food distribution truck in my prior life, a business card, the trademark, right? It's those tangible type things.
Like the graphic representation of the company.
Maybe they get as far as the tagline. Who are we? You know, I think a lot of CFOs, though, do think beyond that. It's how are we perceived in the market? How's the company perceived in the market? And it's very broad based, the quality of work, right? And so if you think about a Fahrenheit, our brand that we want is high quality, high expectations, high delivery. I think in today's world, employee brand, you know, you as an employer is a huge piece of your brand in this labor market of not only retaining, but recruiting.
Yep.
You know, it goes to what's your brand in the community impact, culture. So it's pretty broad based. And I think kind of from a marketing perspective, the CEO gets that part of it. Then they get a little bit of the gray area of marketing, which later on will connect the dots.
Yeah. Let's connect some dots.
Yeah.
So, you've sat across from marketing people as they've presented to you as you were a CFO.
Yeah.
Right? What mistakes have they made?
You know, I think it's beyond the CFO. So I'll put my CEO hat on.
Okay.
You know, and we're going through this process as well. But I also think the marketing with sales, it's the same conversation. Is they walk in, think about left side, right side of the brain. Creative versus the CFO is going to be more analytical, very much performance results driven, maybe a little bit more process and facts versus creative. And so I think walking in with that understanding of the motive, the mindset of the person, the CFO, and then put on top of that, they're walking in with ideas, broad-based concepts, and thinking of how do they connect the dots to more specifics, more not only the qualitative but the quantitative.
Yeah.
How do they get down to ultimately how do you get to something more specific, concrete, performance-based?
ROI.
ROI. Which that's a hard conversation with branding and marketing.
That's right.
As you know, as you've taught me.
Now we're getting into it.
Yes.
Right. So ROI is famously hard to calculate.
Incredibly hard to calculate. And even if you can calculate the returns, it's hard to pinpoint the source of the returns to any one particular initiative at a company. I think part of that is because you don't want to just have one initiative to improve the brand, right? It's not just a new message. It's a new message, hopefully with better trained sales force. So you're doing some of that at the same time. Hopefully you're improving the customer experience at the same time. Hopefully you've done a better job of enhancing the employee culture so you're recruiting well at the same time. And so when you then go to say, "Boy, we got a boost in our performance," it's very hard to attribute that boost
Right.
to a single source.
Yeah. So the murderer's question for the CFO is,
Yeah.
if I run that ad, how much sales increase am I going to get?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a couple things that marketing can help with the CFO. And so I think one is just education. Explaining, we've had to go through as CFO and CEOs the journey, right? Explaining what you just talked about. It's a lot of intangible, it's a lot of activities that may not translate ultimately. Hopefully, ultimately they translate to ROI, but there's not direct connection. I think education, I think the second thing is splitting out the difference between these are activities that are sales driven versus these are activities that are branding and marketing driven.
Interesting.
And helping educate the CFO of these are the things you can expect to return and here's how we're going to do it and not. But ultimately it comes down to metrics.
Yeah.
Right? The CFO is going to hear you. I hear the journey. I hear the impact. I can see what we're doing, but what are the metrics
So
that we can
regardless,
drive that aren't dollars?
yeah, it's interesting to split it up between sales efforts and then brand efforts or marketing efforts, because the sales efforts you should look at and say, look, if this is a sales effort, I need to know what's going to happen in the next quarter because of this, and I need to know how you're going to track it. If it's a brand effort, is there a little more latitude in the mindset of the CFO to say, okay, I may not be able to track it perfectly, but for both of those things over time, you need to tell me how you're going to measure this.
And I've learned that from you all.
Yeah.
Around, all right, it's not dollar tracking, but there are metrics.
Absolutely.
Right? And so looking at impressions, click-throughs, bounce rates, right?
Yeah.
There are metrics that marketing can bring to the table to the CFO that has data that says, here's what we're going to do. I want to spend this money. These are the metrics. These are the benchmarks.
Yeah.
These are what other companies are doing, right? This is not good, this is average, this is best in class, and then track those metrics and provide that dashboard to the CFO so they see results. They may not be dollars, but they're seeing results of the marketing effort.
That's really interesting, because I think what we as marketers have to keep in mind then in this insight into the mind of a CFO is it's not just the narrow interpretation of dollars and cents when it comes to metrics, but it is a psychology of measurement.
Yes.
I'm trained to measure things. That's what I do, right? Now, some of that measurement can be ROI, can be dollars and cents, but if it's not, maybe there's enough latitude to say, okay, I accept that there may not be measurements in dollars and cents, but you need to measure this somehow.
Yeah.
Tell me how you're going to track this thing.
Right.
And there are leading indicators
Yeah.
to if we want sales to improve, and we know in order for sales to improve, we need more contacts to come into the top of the funnel. We need a better impression from those contacts of the company in general. Well, some leading indicators of that are things like Net Promoter, which measure some of those intangibles. Is the customer seeing us with more favorable light? Are they more willing to recommend us? Do we rise to a point where they see that we're doing a great job and therefore we have a great reputation? And then you look at some other leading indicators like, are more people coming to our website? Are more people asking us for information? All of those are leading indicators. They're not sales activity, but they're the things that precede sales activity. I have a good opinion of you. I'm interested in learning about you. And if you're watching those things, they can actually be more impactful than just sales because they don't tell you what's happening today. They tell you what is likely to happen 6 months or 9 months down the road.
I think it's all those metrics you said about the funnel, all the way from the impact of getting someone, right, that first impression. How do you measure all the way through the entire funnel? Because ultimately, if there isn't leads and sales, then the marketing plan needs to change. Right? And so the CFO is going to say, okay, from a risk perspective, at what point, if we're tracking metrics, we're not seeing them move positively, what's plan B? What's the pivot, right? And so the CFO is going to want to know, all right, what's from a risk mitigation perspective? Okay, there's the metrics we're tracking them. At what point, at what trigger do we stop and pivot or try something else.
All right, so let's push on that. That's interesting because marketing lives in a place of possibilities, right?
Yeah.
We tend to be incorrigible optimists. Oh, we're going to grow this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to impact culture, we're going to do all this stuff. CFO's job is to manage risk.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
What does risk management mean in the context of marketing? How do you think about risk management?
With marketing, it's probably all departments, right? If you think about the CFO is trying to take the company strategy and then every department strategy and the way every single department is going to execute it, roll them up and go, all right, this is the strategy, this is what we're going to do, this is what it's going to spend. How do I minimize the risk that some of it's going to work, none of it's going to work, right? That we have some level of return, some level. So the CFO is constantly pivoting with all of the departments constantly pivoting. So marketing, from a risk management perspective with marketing, it's okay, this is the plan, this is what we're going to do, this is what we think the results are going to be.
Yeah.
It may not be dollar results, but there are results that we're expecting, right? Because it's got to be more than some creative ideas we're going to go try.
Yeah, right.
You know, depending on the CEO or the CFO, trying is fine sometimes, right? But at some point you got to measure, some point you got to mitigate the risk of how much you try and how much you spend trying.
We're not good at asking ourselves as marketers the question, what if it doesn't work? Yeah. And you ask yourself that every day, all the time.
Yes.
Right? So if I'm sitting with a CFO, and this is a good piece of advice, right? If I'm sitting with a CFO, I better be thinking back in my mind, he or she is sitting there wondering, this is interesting. What if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
And I need to be able to answer that for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to this. It's you two.
Yeah.
When do you say it doesn't work? Right? When we're going to call it and go, hey, time out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because sitting on the other side of the table, you know, one of the things that can be a frustration for marketers, for people on the creative side, is when they don't have clear enough direction of what it is that you want to have work, right? What is the impact that you're looking for?
Absolutely.
Is it more phone calls from prospects? Is it a higher close rate once you have the prospect? Is it a shift in the reputation toward activities that you need to happen or things you'd prefer to sell? Is it cross-selling so that we have existing customers that we'd like to sell other services to? We're not doing as well at that. Is it recruiting the best and brightest of the next generation so that we can expand the firm? All of those are very finite goals, and each one of them would suggest different strategies. But sometimes that can feel a little fuzzy, even for the creative side of things.
Yeah.
When we're looking to grow the company. Okay, tell me more.
Let me do one final question for you, Keith, before we move on to the next topic. If you could speak to every marketer in the world through that lens right there and tell them something they need to keep in mind when they talk to the CFO about their marketing budget or their marketing initiative, what do they need to know?
You know, I think it's communication, and I think it's early communication. You know, educate the CFO. Help that CFO connect the dots to the company's strategy.
Yeah.
Right? How is the marketing strategy playing into the company strategy of where we're going? So if you can help them connect the dots, educate them on the difference between marketing and selling and short versus long and the journey. Metrics, right? They're thinking data, you know, data. There's a lot of consumer products, you know, organizations that all their marketing is based on data and research. Yeah. And I think that's what the other side of the brain is thinking. Yeah. And then kind of how do you meet in the middle?
Yep. So what I heard is keep in mind that the CFO's brain is always thinking about data and analytics. Track this. How am I going to measure it? When am I going to call it? Don't be afraid to ask the question and answer it. Yeah. What do we do if this doesn't work? Yeah. And how are we going to know? Right? Answer that before he asks. I heard, don't limit your impression of what the CFO wants to measure to just dollars and cents. The CFO might want to measure something else, and they're broad enough in their thinking to understand the difference between sales initiatives and brand initiatives, and connect what you're doing back to the company strategy. Yeah,
absolutely. And think about, they're always thinking about risk. You know,
and risk.
Always thinking about risk. And it's doable as a former CFO or now a CEO.
A recovering CFO?
I wish I knew then what I know now. Yeah. Just around the education of marketing, versus sales and the journey and the black box of creative.
Yeah.
Right. Versus the finite box of numbers.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
interesting because it suggests that we as marketers should be doing a better job of educating. You know, we always assume going into those rooms that people understand what it is we do and why we do it because we understand.
Yeah.
And that's a false assumption.
Absolutely.
Yep. Cool.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for this journey into the mind of a CFO and a CEO.
Yeah.
It's been terrifying.
Hey, cheers.
It's great. Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers. So
Cheers.
thanks to
Drink to
Keith
that.
Middleton. We'll
Yeah.
be back in a second for
Thanks
another
for
conversation. We'll keep
Brandon beers.
We'll keep Keith around for
Yeah.
that conversation too. So
Thank
stick
you.
around. All right, guys, let's continue our conversation with a topic that's near and dear to the hearts of both marketers and CFOs: mergers and acquisitions.
Oh, that's great.
Big one in the news this week. The Smucker's company has bought Hostess.
Yeah, huge deal. Huge deal. They bought it for $5.4 billion. Now, that's a big deal under any circumstances, but I find it to be an especially interesting deal because 10 years ago, Hostess went bankrupt. Shut down operations for the time being, got bought out of bankruptcy by an investor group for 1/30th of what they're selling it for now. 10 years later.
It's a happy CFO somewhere.
There's a very happy CFO and some happy investors too.
That's right. They're going to go out and they're going to really do it up, put some Twinkies on a tray and have at it. It's an interesting deal because when you think about mergers from a brand perspective, the things I think about are customer compatibility, category compatibility, and company compatibility. Smucker is, of course, famous for their jams and jellies. They also own a peanut butter brand, and most people don't know it, but they are the largest provider of coffee in grocery stores. They are behind brands that you know, like the Dunkin' Donuts brand and several other brands of coffee at a grocery level, which I guess goes well.
All right, bring this back to Twinkies now.
I guess it goes well with a Twinkie or a ho-ho
or ding dong or whatever those other.
whatever it is. Now, the price is shockingly high for a category that I think we all thought was shrinking due to people feeling like we ought to be a little bit more healthy and not eat that crap. But after they acquired that business, they really cleaned it up, improved the operations, reduced the cost to operate, expanded the marketplace, and built some loyalty with their employees. And I think that made it look like a good opportunity for Smucker. So I'm giving it a thumbs up because I think it is compatible with customers, right? These are customers who shop at grocery for simple conveniences, simple indulgences. It's compatible at a retail level because they're both serving Kroger and Safeway and the same people. So the ultimate retail customer is the same, and they have very similar cultures within those organizations.
Very interesting. Like T-minus how long until we see jam-filled Twinkies?
Can't be long.
Right? So it's actually, the product compatibility is
sounds
amazing.
good.
The synergy that happens between these companies in terms of product compatibility is great. They've already got the distribution nailed down, like you said. They've got the same retail customers. Their sales force can deal with this. Their distribution channels can deal with this. And when you put these two products together, the possibilities for expansion open up pretty wide.
Yeah, from a distribution perspective, and I don't know if they can do this, operationally, just put more stuff on the same truck.
Yeah, right.
Have one salesperson sell more stuff. The same SKUs, just operationally. And then kind of all the combined overhead, back office from the CFO perspective.
Yeah,
seriously. How do you manage it more efficiently?
Yeah.
I take offense to all that crap. Twinkies are good, man. Twinkies are good.
They're not
Twinkies
bad.
are good, Cal.
I want the Twinkie with the jam and the strawberry
there you
jam
go.
Twinkie. It's got to be coming. I'm looking for having it. I might have a couple Folgers with it. But one question I have, because we talked when we were talking about how a CFO looks at branding, and we talked about risk mitigation, not just opportunity enhancement. I've got to believe there's a little of that in this too. Matt, you work with Mondelez, and they are one of many growing entities that are gobbling up a lot of territory in that same kind of consumer grocery space.
Yeah.
I wonder if part of this is a need to get bigger so that they don't get gobbled up themselves.
Yeah, I think maybe. It's probably a consideration in any merger. Things consolidate, people buy before they get bought and things like that. But I think One of the things I learned in that business, in the CPG business, is the power of distribution and retail. And when you have that kind of compatibility, that kind of synergy between the distribution and the retail customers that you have with Hostess and Smuckers, it knocks down a big obstacle to doing this. You look at that against, like you said, the company cultures are similar, the customers are similar, and now the product compatibility works. It's checking a lot of boxes
Yeah.
right there.
Seems like a good deal.
Seems like a good deal. So anyway, cheers to the folks at Smuckers
Absolutely.
and Hostess.
Absolutely.
All the best to you all. Send a case of jelly-filled
We do,
Twinkies
We want
to
the first.
Fahrenheit and Brand Federation when they
Yes.
come out. So
Thank you.
that's going to wrap up another episode of Beer and Brands. We want to thank you for joining us, of course, but we also want to thank Keith Middleton from
you.
Fahrenheit for giving us a glimpse into the psychology of the CFO and the CEO. It's really, really helpful. I think we, as marketers, Kelly, sometimes get so focused on what we're doing, we forget that on the other side of the table is somebody who's vital to the strategy and the leadership of the organization who thinks differently about this, and we have to understand how that person comes at what we're talking about. And
Absolutely.
Keith's given us a really helpful glimpse into that, into the way those people think. So thank you for
We
that.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks again to you for joining us here at Vossen. Amazing beer, great brewery, wonderful place, and terrific people here in Scott's Addition in Richmond. If you're in Richmond, come on down to Vossen, have a beer. In the meantime, have a beer wherever you are. Think about brands, and we will see you on the next edition of Brand Federation's Beer and Brands.
Looking forward to it. Tell us in the comment field if you like this.